Vanguard of War. This is a cooperative game of tower defense, which is set in this sort of like sci-fi-ish fantasy hybrid world. That reminds me a little bit of Warhammer in terms of the iconography, the colors, brooding, dark, tough heroes with improbable anatomies versus pretty horrific monsters. Fully cooperative, so the player, because the game can be played solo, or players are defending a space in the middle of the board as waves of monsters are coming from the four corners of the board, and their behavior is automatized. There is an AI that controls how they behave. You spend actions, they do their things, you do their thing, and you see who wins at the end. Reminded me a little bit of State of Siege games by Victory Point Games. Reminded me a little bit of Ghost Stories. That's funny, when it came out, no one described it as tower defense, but actually that's probably one of the first games that, as far as I can think of, had that idea. Waves of monsters coming out, and you're running around like crazy. And in that sense also reminded me of Ghost Story, because you have physically located heroes that run around and fight against the monsters. So without further ado, let me show you how Vanguard of War works. This is the board of the game. Sorry for the glare, somehow I couldn't really avoid it. It is divided in squares. As you can see, there are 4 tracks that the enemies, the monsters, will use to try to reach the central area. These 4 squares here, or this space which is as large as other 4 spaces, this is the church. If the monsters get close enough to attack it and to inflict 10 points of damage over the church, the game is over. And here you see the various monsters that we have in the game with their miniatures. If the players survive for long enough until they have been able to defeat a horde of monsters plus the big bad monster before the church is destroyed, then they win the game. The game can be played in 1, 2, or 3 tiers. Basically, each tier has the structure that I just mentioned, which is horde, big, boss, and you can play a single one. Tier 1 is the easiest, then tier 2 is a little more complicated, tier 3 is the hardest, and basically because of this you can program the length and difficulty of the game. You want to play a single, short, simpler game, not too hard to beat, then you only play tier 1. You want to play the long campaign, then leave 1 to 3. You want to play a short game but a hard one, then you only play tier 3. I think you get a sense of how that works. Now, in the game you will have 4 heroes, so if you're playing with less than 4 players, you need to split those somewhat evenly. Each hero has 2 cards, so is described by 2 cards, and then of course you also have a miniature that goes on the board to indicate the position of the hero. So we have here a card with the main stats of the hero, and another one where you place the equipment. There are these cards, but really tiles indicating the equipment, and each character starts with a unique consumable. And then this card also has the abilities of the hero. These cards are double-sided because during the game you may be able to acquire sufficient resources to upgrade your hero. If you go to level 2, that little symbol there indicates that, and they have better abilities, or sometimes they have the same abilities but they cost fewer action points. They become more efficient, they become faster, and I also like the fact that the heroes level up in different ways. In general, however, each hero has a certain number of action points, health points. When the hero goes down to 0, the hero is dead. You can resurrect them, and it's not too hard to do. So at the beginning we thought that was anticlimactic, but then you're still consuming resources and action to resurrect dead heroes. And this way, you have a penalty in terms of gameplay, which is good, but then players don't get kicked out of the game if their hero is eliminated. So health points, very important. Then we have action points. These are, well, guess what? The points that you spend to perform actions during the game. You have speed. Basically, you can move up to that number of spaces in a turn for free. and movement is only orthogonal in this game. Once you start spending action points, you cannot use your default speed anymore. So you can spend action points to perform actions that cost action points. You can also spend an action point to move by 1 space, but again, it would be better if you did it that, but sometimes you want to move for free, spend and perform an action, and then you can still move 1 space. And then we have a passive ability, which is usually a defensive ability described here, a basic attack, which costs 1 action point. I wish it was written somewhere there. And here you also see the basic structure of all attacks in the game. The number next to the little arrow indicates the range. This indicates the number of 6-sided dice that you roll, and this is the target number, the number that if you meet or exceed with a die, it's a success, it's a hit. So basically, this hero, by rolling 3 dice standard, would inflict a hit when rolling 3 or more, and so in a single attack, you can inflict between 0 and 3 hits with that. And then we have other actions. Sometimes they are different types of attack with better stats, with more dice, or with other traits such as ignoring armor of the enemies. Sometimes the abilities are not attack ability, they allow you to do other stuff. Armor is an important concept. When you attack a monster, usually with the exception of the big boss, all the monsters have only 1 health point, but they may have armor. So each armor absorbs a hit. That means to eliminate, say, a monster with an armor of 1, you need 2 hits. A single armor will not do anything. As for the monsters, you have 3 types of monster in each game. These are the 3 types that come in the standard game, and then you have expansions that you can add to have more monsters. Here, for example, we have the succubus, the falafel, no, the felstruffer, and the harvester. Each monster comes with 3 versions, one for tier 1, one for tier 2, and one for tier 3. So basically it's always the same miniature, representing the monster, but depending on the tier, the stats will be different. And here you have the armor value, which is 0, for example, for the succubus, the speed, how many spaces they move on the board, and the attack that they can perform. And then other monsters may have also different traits and abilities. As you can see, as you go up, they get better values. Here, for example, the succubus in the 2nd tier rolls 1 extra die. And here, what is the advantage? Oh, it has a longer range. So, how does the thing work? Well, pretty simple. First, the monsters will take their turn. They will spawn. You will have new monsters that spawn on the board. Then you will have the monsters will move and attack if possible. Then the heroes take their actions, spending their speed values and action points. And you repeat like that until either the heroes have survived the last part of the horde or the attack and they win the game, or the church is destroyed and they lose the game. At the beginning of each turn, you will draw 3 cards on this deck. You will put the big boss at the bottom of the deck, and these simply indicate what kind of enemy is now attacking, is now spawning on the board, and where the enemy comes from. For example, here we have the succubus in spawn point 1. On the board, you have 4 spawn points that are indicated by numbers. So we take a succubus and we play the succubus in spawn point 1. Then we also check if the succubus comes with minions. This part, bottom part, is used for that. You roll 2 6-sided dice, and you compare the results with what you see here. So, for example, 1, there is no minion here. And 3, we get this minion here, which is a protector, as this guy here, that will defend the succubus. And so we place that minion there. Suppose that they had because of the roll, that had received this other minion, which has artillery, makes the attack faster or stronger. So basically a villain plus the minions that come with a villain is called a wave. And so you will have 3 new waves each turn. So you repeat this operation of determining the new monster that comes, where the monster arrives, and determining the minions, which will be between 0 and 2. Do that 3 times. And then it is time for the monsters to activate. The waves will move on this path here by their speed, moving as many steps as they possibly can and getting as close as they can to the church. There is a minion that gives, where is that minion? I can't find it right now. Well, trust me. Oh, actually, this is not, see, I made a mistake. This is not the Protector's minion. That was the Harvester. Oh, here's the minion that has little rockets on his butt. So there's a minion that, if there, will increase the speed by 1. This minion will give an extra die in attack, and the protecting minion has a point of armor and needs to be attacked before anybody else in the wave is attacked. So the monsters will all move, and if they get in range to attack the church, they will attack the church. If they are in a position in which they are in range to attack a character, they will attack the character instead. If there are multiple characters that they could attack, they attack the healthiest one. And to attack, simply put, you roll the dice indicated on the card of the monster, and you remember how it works. Each number that they roll equal to or higher than the number here on their card is a hit. Armor of the heroes absorbs 1 or multiple hits. Whatever is left is taken as ones that you add to the card of the character. If the monster is attacking the church, then each hit is simply placed here. And if there ever are 10 or more hits on the church, then the players lose the game. And this is pretty much how it works. First, you spawn new monsters. The monsters move on the track. They attack whatever it is that they can attack. And then the players act. You can move, spending your speed. You can use your action points in any order you want, performing any combination of available actions that you have. An interesting action is to search. You're searching the area in which you are looking for valuable stuff. Then you place a token here to indicate that you searched there, so you don't search the same space over and over again, because that just seems silly. And when you're searching, you draw a tile from this stack to see what you found. And a lot of this stuff is good stuff. Maybe you get abilities such as this one. Maybe you get consumables. You may get energy that you can use later to level up or to perform actions, medicine, that kind of stuff. There is also a minority of things that are not good at all. It's just bad stuff that happens to you, and then you simply do what the card says. The ascension tokens you use to leveling up. I was looking for something bad and I can't find one to show you. But of course, when I'm playing the game, I find them all the time. Like this one. For example. This is not good, as you can tell. But this is pretty much the basic idea. Your action points will be spent mainly to move when you're done using your speed, to attack, to search, occasionally to resurrect your pulse that fell in battle. And this is how the game works. The rulebook, unfortunately, is a bit of a mess, or a lot of a mess. It's not all that hard to read and to understand. It's just to retrieve information. If you want to double check it later, is very hard, because background information about the characters, about the world building, general considerations are mixed in with rules, and they're not even graphically differentiated from one another. There's a rule that tells you where these demons come from, and then how one of them behaves in the game, and then again about some other background information. Information is not what you expect it to be. There are rules in sections. I know during setup, they're already telling you some rules that should be in gameplay. That kind of stuff. The information is scattered around. I really think that if the rulebook was rewritten and they took out all of the flavor text, the rulebook probably would not be much longer than the rulebook for Pandemic. This is not more complex than Pandemic in terms of gameplay. Maybe a little bit easier actually, because there are fewer actions that the players can take than you have in Pandemic. It's pretty much move, attack, use your actions, but that are self-explanatory. They're explained on the cards. Search, resurrect your friends, and that's pretty much it. So it could be a quote-unquote introductory cooperative game for players that have never played a game of this kind, as an alternative when you want to play a solo game, Pandemic style, but you still want to slaughter something, then of course you have something that is somewhat reminiscent of that game, but of course with a combat feel, with a fantasy feel, with a different theme. But in general, this is a good game. Again, it's very simple once you get past the messiness that the rulebook is. It's very simple, it's very linear, it's very intuitive. You get a sense of where the threats are coming from. So the objectives are pretty clear, but since you have more objectives that you can possibly take care of, then still, although again the problems are very clear and obvious, the strategy on how to address them is not, because, well, the monster that is closest to the church is the one that should attack now, but all of my heroes are somewhere else on the board. And so how do I address that? Well, at the same time, if I shift everybody on that side of the board, then of course the next waves are going to come from the other side, and I have that problem again. The idea is easy: go and slaughter the monsters that are attacking the church. The closer they are, the more important it is, the more they are of a priority. But then implementing that, figuring out how to actually do it, still has a couple of interesting wrinkles there. I think it has a nice level of challenge while remaining very intuitive in terms of gameplay, and quite gratifying in terms of mechanics and theme. You really get that. It's a very thematic game. I like the miniatures, which are very detailed. I wish they were a little more different from one another. Maybe you paint miniatures, so it'll be easier for you to tell them apart. I don't paint miniatures, so from time to time I grab the wrong miniature, and I realize, oh wait, that wave has too many aberrations and not enough minions, that kind of stuff. It's a minor problem / complaint. I like the flow gameplay because, again, it's so simple, but I can concentrate on the story, on the adventure, on maximizing my actions, and it was pretty much, again, the kind of gameplay that you have in Pandemic. Really, this is the closest analogy I can think of Pandemic, but you actually get to fight against the diseases. Again, they kind of look like gigantic viruses, these monsters here, with that idea that you really cooperate with other people. You really say, well, but if I go here and I spend 2 actions, I set up this situation, maybe next turn you can do this, next turn you can do that. Because of that, however, there's always the threat in certain groups of the alpha player problem. You know what the other players have, you know the resources that they have, and so there's somebody who's experienced and a little bit of an annoying person that wants to be the control freak of the situation. Then the player can start controlling all the other players, and then it becomes annoying because maybe they are suggesting the right strategy or the best possible strategy, but if you implement it, then you're not having fun because you're just following instructions. If you don't implement it, then you're not playing very well. So the alpha player problem is a potential problem that you have in cooperative games that have a lot of information available out there. So just know your players, know your group, know the dynamics. And if you have a group in which no one is gonna try to be the alpha, then you have this very interesting negotiation and interaction and synergy of what the heroes can do. I like the fact that the heroes do play differently from one another. They have different abilities, resources. Some is fast, but also very brittle. Some are slow, but also very, very heavy, very resistant. They have the power to taunt the opponent, which also manipulates the way in which the opponents move on the board. And as for the level of difficulty, I liked both the flexibility. I can choose any of the tiers, the flexibility of the structure, short game, long game, and even within each tier, I really like how the complexity has been fine-tuned. Pretty much each tier, each scenario, we found that we were losing or winning by 1 or 2 points. That is, the last monster was on the board and we almost destroyed it and we lost the church, or we destroyed the last monster and we had almost lost the church. So it was always just very close, which to me that's very good. Of course, that's very good. I saw some people complain about it, and I had to join that chorus that there is one thing that goes against this, which is this very balanced, this good balance that has been implemented during playtesting, which is there are some cards in the higher tiers that completely throw the games out of balance. They're just too powerful. And well, just ignore those cards, those event cards. You don't have to. You don't have to use them. Well, the rulebook says that you do, but I don't think you're going to have the game design police breaking into your house and stopping you from not using those cards, or coming up with other ways of changing the difficulty if you find that the game is too easy or too hard. Add more cards, remove some cards, change the stats of the monsters. It's a game that is very easy to even fine-tune further if you feel the need. On top of that, it's also a game that is very easy to expand, because as you can imagine, you just need to have different monsters, different heroes with different stats and abilities, and you're going to have a very different situations. A lot of expansions are already available. I'll try them at some point. I haven't tried them yet, but the game is fun, so definitely I want to see more. I want to get more mileage out of it, and I want to see more combinations of monsters and situations. In general, Vanguard of War, it's almost an intro cooperative game. In terms of gameplay, it's no more complex than Ghost Stories or Pandemic. In terms of challenge, it's less challenging than Ghost Stories, but then that game is flipping tough. But it's fun. This is a fun game. It has a nice flow. It's simple. It's intuitive. It feels very thematic. It creates some interesting situations. Narratively, thematically, it's fun to see these scenes where you're mowing down your enemies, or on the contrary, you're being overwhelmed by them. The theme is really there. It's really it feels pretty strong, which is fun. I like thematic games, and it's nice to see a game that feels thematic while again remaining very playable, very approachable, very streamlined in terms of gameplay, although you may not realize that at the beginning just because the rulebook is not very good. In general, Vanguard of War, pretty good game.